Welcome to Archery Talk 101 podcast, your guide to better archery skills. We'll bring you the latest tips, tricks, and expert advice, but that's not all. We'll also have interviews with top archers and industry professionals and reviews of the latest gear and equipment and much more. Well, for the recording start. Hey, we're going to talk about how your host got started in archery. Hi, my name is Roy Canterbury, and I'm your host today on Archery Talk 101. And I'm going to tell a little bit about my story. I know we've had a lot of interviews recently talking about everybody else's story and how they got started. And, I've mentioned a few things in some of those podcasts, but, I thought now might be a time to, let you know my story and how I got started and how I come about having this podcast as well as this group. Well, I started with a recurve. It ended up being a 25-pound fiberglass recurve, a Ben Pearson one. I got it in the mid 60s and I started, I don't know why I started, but I just wanted to shoot a bow and got started. And I just used a target, was a cardboard box I stuck full of cardboard. And then that's what I shot into. And, now that the cardboard targets, the laid horizontally, so you shoot into the grooves. Now I had mine the other way. I just shot into the side of the cardboard. Didn't know any better. I started with that and I shot that for many years. Then I set it up to do some bow fishing. And, by the way, I still have that bow. It still has the bracket I had to make in order to mount the bow fishing reel on it. Back then you just basically tied a string to the back of the fishing arrow. The fiberglass arrows had a hole in the back, and you draw back and you gotta be careful because you got that big loop and, it can catch on your reel, everything else. They come with a whole lot better deals since then, but I used that. I still have the bow. I won't string it because, being, 50 plus years old, I wouldn't trust it to drop back. It might splinter. And right now it's worth more to me as, as just a keepsake than it is as a bow to shoot, because I have a recurve now if I want to shoot. In fact, the bracket on there is so small, I don't think I can get my hands on it anymore. And so I shot that for a while. And in the 70s, my brother bought a pound bow, a Bear whitetail too. And I took that and I shot that at school for a little while. And then eventually I decided to get my own bow. And I went up to one of the local shops at the time and said, I wanted a bow. And she brought this bow out. It ended up being an American Challenger. They got bought out by High Point, story a little bit later on that. But she gave it to me. I drew it back. She goes, "How's it feel?" It's like, I didn't know any better. I was like, "Feels good." Ended up being a 32-inch draw length is what it was set for. I'm not 32-inch draw length. I'm 29 and a half. So I was drawing 2.5 inches longer than what I should. And I shot it for many years that way. And shooting that long of a bow, you have a tendency to catch your arm once in a while. With that bow, I was out hunting and all of a sudden, being too long, I shot at this deer and the string caught my arm. I heard it hit my arm and, fortunately I got the deer, but it was not a good shot. It was one of those that I actually hit it in the back leg and cut an artery. So it still bled out, but still not, desirable. I shoot muzzies and the muzzy didn't care if it was a bone. There's only one bone in one spot that arrows don't go through, and that's up on the shoulder. Other than that, that broadhead, ribs was nothing, bones was nothing to it. The shoulder blade, as long as you didn't hit that big hard spot on there, that went through just fine. And then that bow there, 1 year, I did like a lot of them do. I go out and a couple weeks for hunt season, I'm going to, shoot my bow, get it all, make sure it's all sighted in, get all ready. Now, like to shoot a little bit more than that, but so I'm down at the range. I was in an archery club at the time, and this was, in the early 90s, I think sometime, and I'm down shooting and I'm trying to adjust the sight to get it sighted in, which it shouldn't have been off by that much. And I'll shoot 5 arrows and go back, adjust it. shoot 5 arrows, adjust it some more. Shoot 5 arrows, adjust it some more. It's just like every time I'm shooting, I'm adjusting it. So I says, what's going on? So I decided I'm going to go up real close to the backstop and shoot and see where it's at. But so I was about 10 yards to the backstop. I drew back, and when I shot, I'm holding the bottom half of the bow. It split, it broke. The top half comes back and smacks me in the chest. And back then, it was one of those poured magnesium risers, which wasn't near as strong as what they were, as they are now. So it broke. So now I've got a week to get me a bow before season starts. So I go out to, a different shop and end up with my first PSE. And I had that for many years. So I got that all set up and went out and was able to shoot. And, everybody has their own, hunting stories. And back on some of my hunting stories, when I first started bow hunting, I didn't have anybody to show me what's going on. I didn't know anything about it. We just went, in friend of mine, my neighbor that I grew up next to, we'd go out and we'd find a place to go hunt, and, we wouldn't see anything. And back when I started, if we seen deer prints in the dirt or in the mud, that was a good day, because that meant there was deer in the area. We didn't know how to look for them, how to find them, anything. It's not like nowadays, so there's a lot of good information. And, then it got to a little bit more hunting, and then it was a good day when we seen a deer. It might be in a field 300 yards away, or driving in, see one running in through a field. Now at least we've seen deer. And, back then, in Nebraska here, we had 2 tags is all we could get. You could only shoot 2 deer. Archery was either sex, either a doe or buck, antlered or non-antlered, because sometimes, bucks don't have antlers, and sometimes does might have an antler. You don't know until you've actually killed them and flipped them over. And so we didn't really have a lot of deer like we do now. We have a lot more now. And we'd go out, and finally we got a little bit better at it, And, now there's so much safety gear. I remember climbing up in a tree and standing on a branch with really nothing there. And, so I wanted something. So I actually tied a rope around my waist, probably not the smartest thing, but, back then we didn't really know. And there wasn't much out there, we knew better, we didn't know any better. And, luckily we survived. But, then we get out there, do more hunting and a little more hunting. And now we're getting where, we're seeing deer while we're in a tree stand. May not get a shot, but now we're seeing deer, and, it's a lot more exciting. And I remember the first year that come by that I actually had a shot at, there was some grasses kind of in front of me that was, I was up in a tree stand, and the grasses weren't, over its belly, but, I'm thinking, okay, I don't have a shot. So I didn't take the shot. And actually I did have the shot, but not knowing, that's why, nowadays it's important to, help out people that are, just starting out. And that's kind of what I'm doing here with this channel, the podcast, Archery Talk 101 podcast, because, everybody thinks beginner classes are 101. That's where all your classes start, with 101. Sometimes 100, but 101 is more the traditional, first class. And then I formed the Archery Talk 101 Facebook group, kind of the same thing, helping out beginners. I want to pass on my knowledge that I've gained over the many years to, new archers and even experienced archers. So now after that bow broke, I had, because High Point had purchased American. So they sent me a bow. Now I was thinking a 32 Australian. So they sent me in what I thought it was at the time, because I didn't know. Remember, I hadn't learned, how to correctly shoot a bow or how to even size one. So this is still, late 80s, sometime in the end when I got that new bow. And of course I had lots of trouble with it and all kinds of stuff. And, finally I just traded that one off. And that's when I got my first PSE, was, because of that. I had that PSE that, when it broke, I just got rid of that bow because I didn't like it. The way it come in, the stickers, when they put those on, they were falling off and got me new ones. And, it's just kind of, I didn't like High Point at that point because of the stuff. So now I'm shooting my first PSE, and finally I'm shooting that for quite a while and not really knowing what's going on. And then I'm still using 32-inch draw length. Now, if 29.5, I come back to the corner of my mouth, and 2 more inches, I'm back by my ear. So I'm really pulling back quite a ways further because it's 2.5 inches longer than what I should be shooting. And about 95 it was. I'd been hearing, a little bit before that, I've been hearing about this back tension release where you don't actually pull the trigger. And I'm thinking, it's like, well, how do you know what you're shooting if you don't pull the trigger? Yeah, I grew up shooting firearms. In high school, I was on a rifle team, for 3 years of high school. And you use the tip of your finger to squeeze the trigger. And, I'm forgetting, it's like, that's the way you shoot the bow, right? It's got a trigger because I use a wrist strap. And, once I got to there, and, the first bows, I was using fingers. I used those for a long time until they started getting newer bows and shorter. And then my ring finger would go numb. So that's why I had to go to release. And, at this time in 95, when I got a chance to go to a class to learn how to shoot, NFAA was teaching a class, and I attended that class. It was a 3-day event. Friday night, you go in Friday night and Saturday night and Sunday night, I think it was, or Sunday afternoon. I forget now. That was in 95. So many years ago, I don't forget exactly the details on it. But I go in there and the guy says, we're going to check your draw length. He looked at me and my draw length and says, you're 29.5. Now my bow set for 32. I'm 29.5. And he says, you need to have your bow set at 29.5 inches for Saturday night, or there's no reason for you to continue the class, because you can't teach you to shoot correctly, or at that point, shoot better technique if your draw length's too long. So I'm spending all day Saturday getting different strings, because those bows then you couldn't just turn a module, or change module. It was more fixed. So the only way to shorten your draw length was you had to get a shorter string. So I'm getting shorter strings and longer cables, and I got it down to 29.5 so that I can continue with the class. And then I started learning how to do this. And, one of the things we did was shoot with our eyes closed. There's like 20 of us or something like that in the class. And we're standing, maybe 5 feet from the target. And it's one of those cardboard ones. So, fortunately with aluminum arrows, they don't stick so bad. The carbons into the cardboard targets, they're hot enough. They get hot enough, it melts the glue and they kind of stick to us as you pull them out. So we're always putting soap or something on them. So we're shooting with our eyes closed, going through, shooting your eyes closed. And then you'd lean forward, grab your arrow, pull it out, shoot again, lean forward, grab it, pull it out, and just keep doing that with our eyes closed until we could feel the proper technique that he was teaching us. Then we'd open our eyes, and that form just went to crap as soon as we opened our eyes. So now we're closing our eyes and then open them up. Shoot your eyes closed, then shoot your eyes open until you finally felt the same thing, your eyes open. Now you got to realize there's no target. There's nothing to aim at. It's just all form. And one of the things you learn in doing that, going through that process, is what it takes to help somebody else. Now, one of the things that might be pertinent a little bit later in the way I teach is in 94, I think it was, or 84 rather, I started taking martial arts. I took Hapkido, and we have a lot of different things to do in there. It all works, body mechanics. You want to direct your force directly through your target, and a lot of things there. So when I learned back tension release, I didn't really correlate the two of them initially, but I did after a while. So I'll get into that a little bit later. But one of the things that I learned from there is, how to do that. And then, not as much as the why, but that I kind of figured out the why once I got a little bit more into it. And then he had Bernie Pelletier, I think was his name. he had something to develop called a can't punch for your releases. And so it's the thing you put on there so you can't actually pull the trigger. You have to use, your back tension where you pull through it and it fires it. I don't know how it worked, but I never got it because I was able to learn how to do it. Now, one of the things that, was teaching in, for firearms is use the very tip of your pad of your finger to fire, to pull the trigger on a firearm. Well, on a bow, you don't want to do that. You want to come back to the second joint, clear back there, because you don't actually move your finger. The process of pulling through with your back muscles actually fired it. That was a whole new concept for me that it was hard to understand, until I finally learned it. And then now once you learn it, it's like, oh, it's a whole different world. There's a whole different thing in there. I can do a whole class just on, just a couple of aspects of shooting. And, if we have interest in that, just let me know. We can do a class on that or something. But, once I got into there, now then I'm shooting better. And, I remember when I first started going to those things called the 3D shoot. You go to the 3D shoot. Now, for those that are listening that know what they are, you know what I'm going to talk about. But those that don't, what it is you have a course set up, either indoors or outdoors, where there are a bunch of foam animals, different shapes. Like you might have a deer, you might have a coyote, you might have a hog, you might have a javelina. There's all kinds of, now there's so many more animals out there. You have dinosaurs and all kinds of stuff. When I first started, there was just the basic few targets, the basic ones people would hunt for. And so I remember my first outdoor shoot. I think I had 8 arrows with me. I forget how many I had. And, back then we're shooting aluminum arrows, not the carbon. That was still early enough that carbons really weren't out yet. And I started off shooting, and I'm figuring the first shoot, by the time I'm I'm already down a few arrows because they missed the targets completely. They're out in the tall grass. You look a little bit for them. If you don't find them right away, then I'm not holding up, all day looking for an arrow. And I'm hoping I can make it through the 40 targets and still have arrows left. That's how I started out. That's how basically bad I was at judging yardage and executing my shot. One of the things that, when I first started doing that, I hadn't learned back tension release, because I started fairly early on those. And then the more I shot, then I'm getting through. And now I'm finally making it through the whole course with the same arrow. I didn't lose any arrows, and that's a big one there, big point there. And then once you get to that point, now then my next goal was to get at least an average of 8 on all the animals, because you have your 5 ring, which is a bad hit, absolutely terrible hit, because now you have a wounded animal. Your 8 and your 10, they didn't have 12s at that time, but 8 and your 10s is your kill zone on your target. So I wanted to get an average of 8. So then finally I got to the average of 8. And, one of the funnest things that we did was a buddy of mine, Randy, he's died since then, but we'd go out and we didn't care where we ended up in the scores, because that's not why I was out there. We was out there, which one of us did better today. It's one of those things where, okay, I beat him. I got to give him crap on the way home. The next time, maybe he beat me. He got to give me crap on the way home. So it's just a matter of, it didn't care. We didn't care who won, because we're all out there trying to just having fun. And that's the thing about the 3D shoots. It's a lot of fun. I shoot target spots to develop my skill, so that I can hit something that I'm shooting at. And I shoot the 3D targets to help me judging yardage. And you get used to judging yardage, and you kind of figure out what's going on. I know I've talked about this before. Your angle. Everybody shoots up or down and says, well, you got to shoot less yardage. You got to shoot lower. And well, yeah and no, because you got to figure out what it is. And I know I've talked this on a couple of other podcasts. Carpenters all know a 3-4-5 triangle is a right angle. And you have on your triangle, you have your 3 side, your 4 side, and the angle between those 2 points is 5. And that gives you a right angle. And when you're in a tree stand, you're up right angle out. So you want to look at the distance the trail is away from the base of the tree, not the angle, because that's not right. But we've gone over that a few other times, and you get used to judging yardage. And then, here a couple of years ago, I finally got me one of these things called a rangefinder, and it has the angle compensation in it. So, it says, okay, on that case, if it's a 3, 4, 5 triangle, you're up 40 and you're out, and it's the trail's over 30. The range is going to say, okay, the true distance is 50. We're going to shoot it for 30, because it'll tell you, okay, this is the angle you're going to shoot it at. You're going to shoot it for 30 yards. And unless you're like straight down, there you could have trouble with some of them. But if you're out, 5, 10 yards, you don't really need a rangefinder. It's those close ones that you got to figure out. And that's where you need to go through and do a lot of shooting to figure out how your bow acts at 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet, and you're 20 feet, you go in there and all those short ones, because, where the arrow is the mouth, where your sights are at your eyes, and they do not line up until they auto waste. So you may have to shoot a lower pin. So now, throughout the years, I do a bunch of shooting, and then, I finally got to where I retired, and I was doing some affiliate marketing. And one of the groups I was in, they went through, and I was learning how to create courses, which I did create a course on online course on how to shoot a bow. I'm not doing a lot with that, but anybody interested, I can always, help you out. I've helped a lot of people out over the years. And one of the things that this said was, who would volunteer to do a podcast a month? And I said, well, I'll do one. And I was like, and then he says, well, who'll do 2? And I said, well, I'll do 2. And then I'm thinking, what am I going to do it on? I said, I'm going to do what? On what? Well, what can I talk about all day long? Well, archery. So I decided I'm going to do a podcast on archery. So I started out not once a month. I did them once a week. Started out once a week. And I started off with first, what's a new archer? Before you don't have a bow, you want to get you're interested in archery, what do you do? And then I created a little checklist for them. And then I said, well, I need some place to send them. So then I created Archery Talk 101 Facebook group. It's like, okay, cool. Now I have a place to send them where I can help them out in doing it, because, having my own store in 2001, I purchased something called the Tackle Box, and not just hunting and, just fishing reels and bait, and, live bait and tackle, but they also had archery in there. And that's when I became a PSE dealer in 2001. And I still shoot PSE, and, I got PSE hat on, kind of put it on today for a reason. But so I went down and spent a week down in Tucson, Arizona at their dealer school. I kind of got ahead of myself here with the podcast, but I spent a week down there learning how to take bows apart, how to make strings, how to make the steel cables. Believe it or not, some of the old bows had steel cables, and if one would break, we had to make new ones for them, because you could buy the blanks. Now you can't buy them. I don't think anybody even has them anymore. So if you have both a steel cable on it and it breaks, yeah, it's pretty much it's parts at that time. So we learned how to make those, learn how to make strings. So when I had my store, I used to make all my own strings. I didn't stock any strings because it wasn't worth my time and money to buy them, because I had the jig. The store already had the jig, and then I got string and the sorbing material, the center material, and all that. And I learned how to make strings, and I made lots of strings over the years. And while I had the shop, a lot of the bows come in at that time were the ones that you didn't really have to change, those that use the winner's choice string. There's other string manufacturers out. That's just at the time, back 20 years ago, that was kind of the top of the line string. And they put those on some of the higher end bows. The lower end bows got just something that was mass produced. I watched them down at the PSE school making strings, and they wrap it around, and it spins around them, and they hook it, and they make a string in just a matter of, a few minutes, and they've got a string all done, where it takes me a little bit longer than that because I'm, hand doing them. I don't have a machine that spins the string and all that kind of stuff. But so a lot of the bows would get a new string just because they didn't last very long. And I know all my staff shooters, get the new bow in. The first thing we do is make them a string, because what I used was, higher quality string material. It didn't have a lot of stretch. Some of the original strings would never really stop moving. So you put a peep in and you draw back and you shoot for a while, and next thing it's moving. Then you got to adjust it, move it, adjust it, or you're putting one of those peeps in, it has a rubber on it that forces it around. And then, the problem with those is now that rubber beats up on your string and then wears it out. You can always see where they hit them because it takes those black strings and turns them white. And, a lot of things like that. So I was able to, tear apart bows and everything else. Down at the PSE school, we tore the bow down to no two parts were together. So the limbs were off, the limb pockets, we had everything out of them, the bolts were all out, the axles were off, the clips were off. Everything was all in pieces. The strings weren't on it. Everything was apart. So you just had a box of parts. And then you go in, the first thing you do is you put the limbs on, you tighten them down, you put them in the bow press, then you put a little pressure on them. So now you can hold them in place, so you put the axles on. And then once you get those on, then you start working on the strings and the cables and get those on. And then you put your sight back on. And then over the years, you learn how to roughly set them up so they're very close just by eyeballing it. One of the things that we learn is, where you put your arrow and then your knock point, it needs to be at a right angle. So we would use levels to actually set that. And, so that made it even better. But you can kind of do the center shot, just take your string, center it between your upper and lower riser. And while you're looking at that, you should see straight down your arrow. If the point is off left or right, and adjust it. So we was able to get them really close. So the low end bows, that's basically how we set them up, where we didn't go through a big effort and making them perfect. We got them, you really couldn't tell much difference, but you could do that little fine tuning. And then we could always do, changes later. And the reason why we didn't go through a big ordeal in setting them up, because if you change the draw length or change the weight, things can change on you. So we didn't do a super fine tune on them until we was ready to actually set them up for that person. Once we get that set up, then we go through and check everything, put it in a jig, put a little level on it, make sure it's all set and ready to go, set the center shot. Because if they wanted, say somebody got one, but they want a different rest, now we've gone through all this work. So we didn't do a lot of that. We just basically can shoot them and see what's going on. So that's kind of where we went with that. Let's see here. I just check to see if anybody any comment. I know nobody's joined us yet, so as you see they'd come into the back of the screen here. But that's kind of what we did on the shop for a while. In teaching archery, it's a lot of fun. I've taken when I had my store, a guy come in, and normally what I would do, a new archer, I'm going to sell him. That time was the Nova bow, which has got plastic wheels and steel cables and just a single string on it. 32, 36 inches, something like that. I forget what it was now, but that's what I would sell them. And I had them both right-handed, left-handed, and they come in 3 different draw weights, the 65 pound and the 55 and 45 or something like that. I forget. There's 3 different weights, and you depend on what it is. So I stocked 2 right-handers and 1 left-hander in each one. So the beginner could come in, and they could shoot a bow. I had something to fit. Not like now where I'd have to stock 2 rights and 1 left, because you can throw adjustable. That's what's nice about the new bows now. Then you were somewhat fixed in draw weight and draw length. You could adjust a little bit. The draw weight was about a 10-pound limit. So if you had a 65-pound max, you could go down to 55. On the 55, you go down to 45, and 45 down to 35. So you could pretty much adjust anybody in there. And so I sold, actually, I looked last year, I had a store, 40% of my bows were left-handed. And like, well, why would you sell? How come 40%? because I was the only archery store that stocked left-handed bows for beginners. Nobody else had them. And if you're left-handed, you want to come in, you want to shoot a left-handed bow, right? It's just like, we're right-handed, and all the bows were left-handed, it wouldn't feel right for us. And, I say right-handed, left-handed, it's actually which is your dominant eye. So that can vary. So you might be right eye dominant, but left eye, right-handed, but only left eye dominant. So it could change. And, that's just something, we learn, we go through. And that's one of the things that I, brought out for the beginner. You need to know this stuff. So when you get to the store, the archery store, if they're asking the right questions. So after shooting for a while, learning the back tension relays, and then as I'm teaching, I had one guy come in. He was a beginner, had never shot a bow before, wanted to shoot a bow before. I was going to show him, the Nova bows, the low end bows, and because he didn't want to buy a second bow later, he wanted a high end bow. So we sold a high end bow. And what I did with all my bows that I sold, not only were they set up as part of the purchase price, but you also got shooting instruction. I figured if you shoot better, you're going to stay with it. You stay with it, you're going to come back and get more parts. As you're going to get more arrows, you're going to upgrade your rest, your sight, or something. So you're going to come back in there. And I wanted you to shoot and enjoy the sport because I wanted to stay in the sport. So I taught him how to shoot, got his bow set up for him, showed him how to shoot. 2 weeks later, he comes to me and says, I wrecked an arrow. He got a Robin Hood 2 weeks after he shot his first bow. For 2 weeks is all it took him to get his first Robin Hood. And can we do that all the time? No. Have I done it? Yeah, I've done it several times, but I don't like shooting single spots because it wrecks too many arrows. So, I've done that. And, after I closed my store, I worked at Bass Pro, worked at Cabela's, both in their archery department. And I had one guy come in and he was grouping about 6 inches. It was his tightest he could group. So we spent about 45 minutes with him and shortened his draw length because it was too long, which generally most of them are, and shot him how to shoot. I taught him how to shoot. And in 45 minutes later, now he was grouping in about 1.5 to 2 inch groups. And how much fun are you going to have doing that? I've done a lot of teaching on that. And one of the things that I have done is I've incorporated a little bit of the martial arts into my instruction so that I teach slightly different than a lot of people teach. I don't teach an open stance because what happens, for me anyway, is as I'm pushing my hand to the target, I want it to go. So when it goes off, it's not locked out. It goes to the target. So that those that you can't hear, but those that see, as my hand goes off, if I'm aiming at the camera, my hand goes off, I'm going to go straight to the camera. If it doesn't go to it, then I'm pulling it off somehow. I don't hang on to bows. That's why you put a sling on them, so you don't have to hang on to the bow. If I shoot a bow and it has a violent jump forward, I don't have a sling on it, well, it's going to end up on the floor. I almost did that once. I forgot I was shooting another bow that wasn't mine. It didn't have a sling on it. It was one of the store ones. And I shot, and when it hit my fingers, then I was like, oh, I better grab that after it hit my fingers. But the arrow's already gone at that point. So there's just a lot of things that I teach slightly different. And when I like to teach, I like to tell you why I'm telling you to do this. Sometimes you'll get somebody teaches, well, just do this. Well, why? Well, because I said so. And that's not a valid answer. Over the many years of teaching martial arts and teaching archery, I've kind of merged the martial arts experiences I have into the archery, which helps me out with the why, because it's all body mechanics, and that's all it is, and in learning those, and that's kind of where I'm at with that. And back to the story of why I started the podcast. Once I started the podcast, then I was doing it just myself. It was just me on here once a week. I'd come on and I'd have different information, like like I said, the first one is, what do you do if you want to get a bow? One of the first things you want to know is, well, why do you want a bow? Is it because you watch Hunger Games and you thought it was cool, want to try it? Or is there some other reason? And then what is it that you want to do with archery? There's so many things you can do with archery. I did a history of archery one time and found out it was 64,000 years old. They found evidence of archery equipment that's 64,000 years old. Think about that. It's like archery's been around that long. And, of course, it's evolved quite a bit. And, then I went into teach, other things, what do you do when you get your first bow? How to you fletch your arrows, why you want to fletch with feathers or vanes, the advantages of both. See, I got into, I'm going to drink here. I get into some safety stuff, how to judge yardage, how to shoot at angles, just all kinds of different stuff in there. And, then I started doing some interviews and, I'm finding like, this is a whole lot of fun, talking to archers around the world that, it's real interesting. And I started getting more people on the podcast. So I started going out twice a week. So the podcast comes out in the audio format on Mondays and Fridays. I use Spotify is where most of them are at. I upload to anchor.fm, which is what I use to post it. And it goes out to other sites, so I get Spotify users, I got Apple users, and, listen to that. Well, I wanted to, also use it for someone else. That's why I record them in a Zoom. So we get a video and I upload that to my YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel called Learn to Fix It Yourself, because it's not just archery, but it might be gardening, it might be all kinds of different stuff that I do out there, and it's what it learned something over the years. I've done so many things, I've learned so many things. My idea was I can learn to do it, buy the tool for less than I can pay somebody else to do it. Why do I want to pay someone else to do it when I can learn it and have the tool to do it the next time? If you do something once, now I may have to do it again and again. And do I want to pay 3 times when I can pay less the first time and learn? And it's just so much more fun learning stuff. And, and now I'm able to pass this on to other people. So some of my videos is like, you're watching me make mistakes left and right. Well, sometimes the mistakes, you're doing the same thing. And it's like, how did I solve it? And, I don't like this. Just like, okay, no mistakes. Sometimes I filter out some of them because they really don't apply to what I'm trying to show. And then I also uploaded them to the Facebook group. Well, back at to say, you know what? I'm going to give the Facebook group an advantage here because I'm going to go live in the group, which I'm doing now. I'm going live in the Archery Talk 101 Facebook group, as well as recording it to use on the Spotify or the podcast, as well as upload to my YouTube channel. And one of the things that we can encourage you to do is make comments, in the show. If you're listening to this and you have a question for us, go ahead and question us. And like today, I went ahead and put a link in the group for the podcast to join the podcast. So that if somebody wants to come in, you're welcome to come in and join us. Some do, sometimes we get comments, sometimes we don't. It just everything's out there, and I know you get modified. Modified. You get notified when I put one out, just because it's that's the way, when you go live, everybody gets notified that you went live. So that's kind of what I've been doing. And, I just enjoy talking with archers, from all over the world. I've talked to several in several other different countries. And the nice thing about like the group is all over the world. There's people in countries that I have to do a Google Maps on it to figure out which country they live in. And it's one of those sports that, if you have a bow in your hand and you're an archer, they're automatically a friend. And a lot of us archers like to talk about archery. We like to help you out. When I become a NFA archery instructor, which after the instruction for how to shoot, then it has another whole class that we had on actually how to be an instructor. The differences between, learning it and teaching it is a little bit different. Than the more you teach it, the better you get at teaching, and the more you teach, the better you get, the more you get to teach. And, just kind of big cycle. Is like, it's so much fun. So that's just kind of where I've been. And, now it's, this is one of the things that I focus on is doing the podcast, because I enjoy doing it. And then I create YouTube videos. And then the other thing I do, the only thing else I do is, I underwrite multifamily deals for investors, so that, I go find the deal and say, here you go, here's a good deal. I present it. And if they like it, they invest. If they don't, well, go find another one. So that's mostly what I'm doing. And it's just so much fun doing this. And I enjoyed doing this and talking to archers all over the world. It's been kind of different talking, about myself here, because I really hadn't done that in before. And I thought, well, I have a time when I have a slot that is, this one is actually going to come out Monday. I end up with a free time. So I was like, okay, now's the time I can tell you my story and, how I started. And, I still shoot my 2001 PSE Carrera that I got when I went down to the PSE Dealer School. And while I had the store come out the PSE Scorpion, and mine is actually a 3-string version. And the one they come out with the next year after I got mine was a 2-string. It had a single cam on it, or mine has 2 cams, a control cable, a Y cable, and then a string. And it come out just that one year, and then they dropped that line for some reason, because I think it's a good bow. That's the bow I set up for doing like 3D shoots or target shoots. It's all for shooting target arrows. My Carrera is set up for my hunting arrows, because my hunting arrows do not impact like my field tips. But I don't care, because I have another bow. I'm lucky I have another bow. So I have those set up to shoot the field tips on the newer bow. The older bow, my hunting bow, is set up to shoot broadheads. And I shoot muzzies. It's the only one I've ever shot. It's such a good arrow. I figured out how to tune them so I can put them right where I want. I can shoot X's with the broadheads. The other bow, I can shoot X's with the target, but I can't switch them, because the target arrows don't fly the same out of my hunting bow, so they don't impact the same spot. But if I do want to practice and not use my broadheads, I don't care that they're not impacting where I'm aiming. All I care is that they're grouping the same spot on all the targets, because I don't shoot single spots anymore. It's just too expensive. I used to bust knocks on my aluminum arrows all the time and break the inserts. I shoot double X78s in a 25-12. That's the straightest shaft you could get at the time with double X78s. They were a 1.5 thousandths straightness. And just get the 25-12 for you new shooters that don't know anything except carbons. The first number is in 64ths, the second number is in thousandths. So a 25-12 would be 25 64ths diameter with a 12 thousandths wall thickness. And that's how they designate the old aluminum arrows. Now carbons, they're start off, a lot of them start off with maybe 100, 200, 280, 340, 4, whatever the numbers. And as they get higher numbers, they get weaker in spine. PSE, on the other hand, does not do that. Their stiffest spine is their 400, and then 300, 200, 100 is their weakest spine. So you need to know that when you're looking at arrows, and that's part of what we do as a bow tech, as we look at the charts. We know what your draw length is. We know how long the arrows are. We know what your draw weight is, and we know the minimum weight we can have on the arrow. Either 5 grains per pound or 7, depending on if you're doing, which standards you're doing. But no way do you want to go less than 5, because what happens if you go lighter than that, it gets the arrow faster, but also louder, and it's also harder on the bow. So the heavier arrow is going to be easier on the bow. It's also going to be quieter, but also slower. The old days we'd put overdraws on our bows because we wanted to get a shorter arrow, shorter brace height, and faster arrows. A lot of the guys that also shoot more than 70 pounds, that shoot 80 pounds, 90 pounds. One of the guys I used to hunt with, he shot 90 pounds. Fast arrows, but that's a lot of weight to pull because there wasn't a lot of let off. Back then, you draw back and you're holding a good percent, the compounds, you're holding a good percentage of them. You might have, very little let off. So you're holding, good portion of it, 65% let off as opposed to the 80 you have now. So how that works, let's say you're pulling a 100-pound bow, you have 65% let off. Well, you're only letting off 65 pounds, so you're holding 35 pounds. Well, if you have an 80% let off, you're only holding 20. So that's where the higher let off, and there for a while they went through and it's like, okay, they put an asterisk by you if you had, higher than a 65% let off. And now they've dropped all that because, everybody's shooting, the higher let off bows. Unless you're shooting recurve or compound or longbow, there's no let off on those. That's one of the things that they don't shoot the same. Your muscles are not quite the same. As you pull back on a traditional type bow, the further you pull, the harder it gets. Bows are rated at 28-inch draw length. So let's say you have a 30-pound bow at 28 inches, what it's rated at, and you pull it to 29, you're not pulling 33 pounds, not 30. So it's roughly about 3 pounds per inch is what that is. It's there's just so many things that I can talk about. I just don't want to take a long time and talk about them. So if there's any subjects you want me to talk about, something that you want to learn, hey, just put it in the comments. Get a hold of me. You can, if you're watching this on YouTube, put it in the comment. If you're listening on the podcast, put a comment in there. I do look for those as well. And if you're in the archery group, you can always get a hold of me and say, hey, I would like you to talk about this, or I'd like to learn a little bit about this, and I'd be glad to put something together and help you out. There's in the group, there's so many different instructors. We all have different experiences. Anywhere from when I had my store, this guy calls me up one time and says, can you install 2 rests on my bow so I can shoot 2 arrows at the same time? Now there's 2 other stores, shops in the town, in the town at this time. And it's like, well, why? It's just, why would you want to do that? And he says, well, all the other stores said they wouldn't do it. So I said, well, okay, stop by after he closed and we'll play. Because I knew he couldn't afford me during hours, but I was like, I wanted to try it, see what's going on. Now, was able to set them up, was able to get now they were the stick-on type rest because it was not a center shot design riser. So they weren't, otherwise it would have had probably something else to do. So I had to stick on rest, and we was able to figure out what's going on. It's usually with the release. So we figured out, the best way to put the loop on, best way to set them up. And we was able to get the difference between the impact was at most 1/8 of an inch at 20 yards. That's how tight was able to get the groups. Finally, after spending about an hour, something like that, playing around with all kinds of different things. And, we can get into, how the best way to set up a loop. And we can get into all kinds of different things, how to set them up. There's a lot of things we can get into, but I just want to kind of give you, my history, my background, some of the things that I've been doing, just to kind of get to know me a little better. And that's kind of what we're doing right now is just getting to know, a little bit more about me. And, I enjoy learning about, archers. If anybody knows of somebody that's thinking about just starting in archery and haven't got their first bow, hey, let's get him on the podcast. Let's talk to him and let's see, go through what we want to look at. The only requirement to be on the podcast is that we're going to start talking archery. Where we go from there, as you can probably see on some of the other podcasts, is kind of all open to whatever. Let's get on here and get to know each other and promote this sport. It's such a fun sport to do, and it's something that you can do for many, many years. And even when you're too old to pull back a traditional bow, you go into compounds. And if you can't do that, you know what? Crossbow. It's archery. Some may not think it is, but it is archery. Because as we've talked about some of us, my definition of archery is a stick with a string playing in another stick. Now, if anybody has a better definition, that fits, that's archery. That is archery, because what did it start off with? A stick with a string playing in another stick. You sharpen a point on it and go. That fits recurves, longbows, crossbows, compounds, self-made bows. Now the stick could be, I've seen some make them out of PVC. It works. Probably not what I would probably use, but you know what? It can be done. You just need to play around with it and go from there. But hey, it's been kind of fun talking about what's going on here. Just let me know how I can help you. That's what I'm doing. That's what I enjoy doing. I enjoy teaching archery, as everything else. I want to help archers out, and over the years I've learned a lot of stuff, and I just wanted to be able to pass it on. And that's one of those things that, hey, we're all having fun. If you're not having fun, you need to do something different, because this is a fun sport. Yeah, not saying there's not challenges. There's challenges every day, just trying to figure out what's going on, or getting the time to do it. Or like me, working on a bow, and I got too many things going on. I don't have my bow fixed up, so I got to work on that. Who's the last bow to get worked on? The bow techs. That's kind of how it goes. It seems like when I need the string, it took on my hunt bow, it ended up taking me about 3 years to finally get to it, because it's doing other things. So any way I can help, just let me know. And it's been great talking with you guys, and let me know how I can help you. My name is Roy Canterbury, and I've been the host today on Archery Talk 101, and we'll talk to everybody later.